Gopi Jannavalava Girivaradari Yashodanandana Vraja Janaranjana Namunati Ravanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunjavihari Shri Shri Gaura Mahaprabhu Shashi ki, Shri Tulsinath Maharaj ki, Shri Giridhara Rara ki, Shri Narsingh Bhagavan ki, Shri Mate Vrindadevi ki, Shri Prabhupada ki. Reading from Prabhupada, your ever well wisher. Chapter Let There Be a Temple Part 2. Mrs. N, although not as legally astute as her late husband, carried on the fight. So previously, just to clarify, Mr. N was hospitalized after a severe heart attack after having a confrontation with Srila Prabhupada and then later left his body. His wife, Mrs. N, although not as legally astute as her late husband, carried on the fight, and her lawyers, eager to collect their fees, pursued even more intently than she the litigation to drive out ISKCON. In April 1973, at ISKCON's instigation, ISKCON's case came before the High Court. There were tactical delays, however, and the month after month passed with no decision. Prabhupada did not commit himself to construction on the land because he had no deed and no assurance of one. He returned to India, but still nothing had happened to resolve the matter. Life in ISKCON Bombay was peaceful, but progress remained stunted, the outcome uncertain. Then one day, without warning, Mrs. N launched a violent attack. On the morning of June 1st, while the devotees were attending to their routine duties, a truck drove onto the Juhu property. A demolition squad had come to dismantle the temple. Somehow Mrs. N had convinced an official in the city government to authorize demolition of the temple, a modest structure of brick reinforced concrete. When Giraj attempted to show the officer in charge a letter establishing ISKCON's rights, the man ignored the letter and signaled for the demolition to begin. Struck 100 demolitionists working with blowtorches and sledgehammers swarmed over the property. The demolitionists mounted ladders and began breaking the roof of the temple hall with sledgehammers. Others used torches to cut through the steel supports. The plan of the demolition squad was to knock out the steel supports of the Kirtan hall and proceed methodically towards the deity house, wherein Radha Rasabihari stood. The devotees tried to stop the demolition, but policemen soon appeared on the scene, and working in pairs would grab the dissenters by the legs and arms and carry them away. Police dragged the woman away by the hair, while tenants on the land looked on. Some were glad to see the demolition, although others were sympathetic. Out of fear of the police, however, no one moved to help the devotees. One devotee, Manaswi, ran to a telephone and called Mr. Mahadevia, who, along with his friend, Mr. Vinod Gupta, rushed to Hare Krishna land to find the police dragging off the last protesting devotee by the hair. She had been trying to close the door to the altar to protect the deities when 3 policemen had wrestled her away. Mr. Mahadevia rushed to the house of a sympathetic tenant, Mr. Acharya, and phoned his brother Chandra Mahadevia, a wealthy businessman and friend of Bal Thakur, the leader of one of the most influential political parties in Bombay. Stop here. It's quite intense. Okay, couple more. Mr. Chandra Mahadevia informed Bal Thakur of the emergency. At the instigation of a Hindu, and under the orders of a Hindu municipal officer, a Hindu temple of Lord Vishnu was being demolished. Mr. Thakur in turn informed the municipal commissioner, who denied knowing of any order to demolish the temple, and who in turn phoned the local ward office that had sent out the demolition squad. The ward office sent a man to stop the demolition. The officer arrived around 2 p.m., just as the demolition squad had cut to the last pillars and were dismantling the roof above the deities. In order to stop the demolition, the order to stop the demolition was given to the ward officer in charge, who then stopped the demolition squad. Prabhupada was in Calcutta at the time of the attack, and when the devotees reached him by phone, he told them to organize the local ISKCON sympathizers and life members and protest the attack by mass publicity. They should also expose the persons responsible. This would be very effective against Mrs. N and her party. Is that okay? We'll stop. Srila Prabhupada ki. Who says spiritual life is boring? Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Jai, reading from Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 6, Chapter 16, entitled King Chitraketu Meets the Lord, and text 5. Bandhu, Gyati, Ari, Madhyasta, Bandhu Gyatari Madhyasta, Mitrudashina, Vidvishaha, Mitrodashina Vidvishaha, Sarva, Eva, Hi, Sarvesham, Sarva Eva Hi Sarvesham, Bhavanti, Kramasho, Mitaha, Bhavanti Kramasho Mitaha, Bandhu Gyatyari Madhyasta, Mitrodashina Vidvishaha, Sarva Eva Hi Sarvesham, Bhavanti Kramasho Nitaha, Bandhu Gyatyari Madhyasta, Mitrodashina Vidvishaha, Sarva Eva Hi Sarvesham, Bhavanti Kramasho Mitaha, Bandhu Gyatyari Madhyasta, Mitrodashina Vidvishaha, Sarva Eva Hi Sarvesham, Bhavanti Kramasho Mitaha, Bandhu Gyatyari Madhyasta, Mitrodashina Vidvishaha, Sarva Eva Hi Sarvesham, Bandhu Gyatyari Madhyasta, Mitrodashina Vidvishaha, Sarva Eva Hi Sarvesham, Bhavanti Kramasho Mitaha, Bandhu Gyatyari Madhyasta, Mitrodashina Vidvishaha, Sarva Eva Hi Sarvesham, Bhavanti Kramasho Mitaha, Bandhu Gyatyari Madhyasta, Mitrodashina Vidvishaha, Sarva Eva Hi Sarvesham, Bhavanti Vaishnavis. Bandhu Gyatyari Madhyasta, Mitrodashina Vidvishaha, Sarva Eva Hi Sarvesham, Bhavanti Kramasho Mitaha. Bandhu, friends, Gyati, family members, Ari, enemies, Madhyasta, neutrals, Mitra, well-wishers, udasina, indifferent, vidvishaha, or envious persons, sarve, all, eva, indeed, he, certainly, sarvesham, of all, bhavanti, become, kramasha, gradually, mitaha, of one another. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki. In this material world, which advances like a river that carries away the living entity, all people become friends, relatives, and enemies in due course of time. They also act neutrally, they meditate, they mediate, they despise one another, and they act in many other relationships. Nonetheless, despite these various transactions, no one is permanently related. Responsibly, please. In this material world, which advances like a river, carries away the living entity, all people become friends, relatives, and enemies in due course of time. They also act neutrally, they mediate, they despise one another, and they act in many other relationships. Nonetheless, despite these various transactions, no one is permanently related. Purport. It is our practical experience in this material world that the same person who is one's friend today becomes one's enemy tomorrow. A relationship as friends or enemies, family men or outsiders, are actually the results of our different dealings. Chitraketu Maharaj was lamenting for his son, who is now dead. He could have considered the situation otherwise. This living entity, he could have thought, was my enemy in my past life, and now, having appeared as my son, he is prematurely leaving just to give me pain and agony. Why should he not consider his dead son his former enemy, and instead of lamenting, be jubilant because of an enemy's death? As stated in Bhagavad Gita 3.27, Prakriti kriyamanani gunai karmani sarvashaha. Factually, everything is happening because of our association with the modes of material nature. Therefore, one who is my friend today, in association with the mode of goodness, may be my enemy tomorrow in association with the modes of passion and ignorance. As the modes of material nature work, in illusion we accept others as friends, enemies, sons, or fathers, in terms of the reactions of different dealings under different conditions. Jnanatimirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Jena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Shtapitam Jena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Ganamayam Daranti Swaparantikam Vandeyam Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagajatam Sagana Raganatam Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijina Saitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Pada Sagana Lalita Shri Vishakam Vitamscha Shri Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dino Bando Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostate Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sutadevi Pranamami Hari Priye Panchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Vinepacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namah Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shiva Sari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Humbly seek the blessings and the wishes of the devotees that I am able to speak some words of some relevance to the text. It's stated in one of the purports in the 10th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita that discourses amongst devotees can only take place amongst those who are anxious to be in Krishna consciousness. So, yeah, I seek your blessings that I may remain anxious to remain in Krishna consciousness. Therefore, we can relish this transcendental literature. We're a very exciting point in this pastime. The mystic potency of Narada Muni, then the son of Chitraketu Maharaj, Harsha has been temporarily brought back to life, really for the purpose we see here of, really for the purpose of instructing his father. Narada Muni is such an excellent preacher. He's always in the right place at the right time. This is one of the potencies of the preacher is being in the right place at the right time and saying the right thing. And interestingly, Narada Muni, he knows that the right thing for him to say is not actually to say anything, but to get the son of Maharaj Chitraketu to speak. Because also where we hear information coming from is also very important. Perhaps ordinarily, if a son is to instruct a father on spiritual matters, it's often not recommended because of the dynamic. But in this situation, because the father is in a very emotionally unstable state, then perhaps Narada Muni is envisioning a very effective preaching strategy. So always one lesson we can take from this is everyone is ready for some form of spiritual knowledge, but we just have to present it to them in a way which is actually going to penetrate and leave some lasting impact. And often when we connect through emotions, this is more effective than connecting through intellect. People are not intellectual beings, people are emotional beings. This is why stories are so powerful. Bhagavatam, which is the collection of the greatest stories. And to use the word story does not in any way dismiss them or make them any less. It's still a historical account, but a story is described transcends the false ego. Because when we hear philosophy, then the false ego gets in the way and stops us from actually apprehending. But when we hear stories, because we oftentimes, perhaps in the Mahabharata, it's a great story, everyone can enjoy it. And you can see the good guys and the bad guys, you're not really thinking about it. But on deeper introspection, you begin to realize, okay, this Duryodhana, actually, maybe there's quite a lot of that in me. Maybe, or these other people who are supposedly on the bad side, we realize that some of these characters are inherent with us. So, hearing stories, it transcends this barrier which is stopping us learning. And this is why children love stories. It's interesting. If anyone spends any time with children, they love stories. And they love the same stories. I remember getting two sisters who were quite younger than myself growing up, so I would sometimes read to them, and it's very common amongst children. They want the same story again and again and again. And like as someone who's like older, and it's like some sort of, in my opinion, some rubbishy children's story. Well, let's change it. Let's get a new one. We did that one yesterday. Let's do. But they just want the same one again and again and again because this is the way that they're actually developing. They don't need new stuff. They need the same stuff repeated. And we're spiritual children right now, so oftentimes, I already know that pastime. Even yesterday, Prabhupada Pranaprabhu, we started talking about the pastime of Jagai and Madai. My first reaction is, I know this pastime. We hear it hear it so often. I want to hear some other, relishful pastime of Lord Nityananda. But then when you stop yourself and think, actually, no, this is the transcendental activities of the Lord. Then yeah, it's just as relishable every single time you hear it. Once you there has to be you have to open yourself up a little bit. Stories are very powerful. So here, Harsha Shoka is instructing Maharaj Chitraketu about the temporary nature of all our material relations. It's a very nice analogy. In this material world, which advances like a river, it is stated that a river is never the same. constantly flowing. You know, the water in the river is always fresh. But there's one exception to this rule, because it's like time. Time is inevitable. So it's always, everything is just being like decomposing, becoming destructive, etc. Described that when Krishna was, I, somehow, I think he was walking through the river Yamuna, taking bath. I'm not entirely sure of all the details, but somehow or other, uh, but the water in the river Yamuna itself was so ecstatic by being in contact with Krishna's lotus feet that it actually stopped flowing. And there's still, to this day, when you go to Yamuna, there's parts of the river where somehow the current is going in the opposite direction because the water there is still stuck because uh, you know, there's the laws of nature. Then there's coming in contact with Krishna, and this sort of transcends the laws of nature sometimes. This is very interesting. This analogy is describing how all our material relationships are like a river; they're just flowing and they're temporary, etc. And when we add Krishna, when we have relationships with devotees, then this is permanent in one sense, you know. Um, and so we have to develop a sense of detachment in our material relationships to some degree. We still act loving, etc., but we can't see them as all in all. But in our relationships with devotees, we should never become. We should, in some sense, we should be independent, but we should also be entirely dependent upon the devotees, you know, in these relationships and having a loving exchange with devotees. Prabhupada said the whole purpose of ISKCON was to facilitate loving exchanges between the devotees. And yeah, if we think that we can go back to Godhead on our own, then you know, good luck to you. But this is not the mood of you know, any of our acharyas. See, even like Haridas Thakur, he was chanting. It was 196 rounds per day, 192. So that's a lot of Hare Krishnas, you know. But not only that, we heard yesterday he's engaged. He's going round door to door, knocking on people's doors with Lord Nityananda. He's chanting an insane amount of rounds. He's preaching full on. But it's also described that he has very, very loving exchanges with the devotees. Now, I don't know if he sleeps or whatnot, and we can't imitate. But nonetheless, we should never, you know, our sadhana is very important. Our preaching, our sankirtan is very, very important. But also having loving exchanges with the devotees is also of utmost importance because, you know, we want to be here for the long run, not just a short burst, you know. Mode of goodness is to do things long term and sustain them over a long period of time. And to do that, we need to have, you know, support and deep emotional connections because we're personal beings. Yes, it's very interesting how material relationships, then often, as described in this verse, people who are previously our friends then later become our enemies. And you often see this. Prabhupada is only referring to in this lifetime. You know, the same person who is our friend today becomes one enemy tomorrow. And this is very true. We see that also materially. But when speaking across multiple lifetimes, this is also even more true. You sometimes see family situations where, like, these people might be married or they might be, you know, parent and child, etc., but they're just worst enemies. And if you're karmically, they get entwined together because, you know, they're thinking of each other at the time of death, etc. Really, really suffering in these situations. But we see that one material situation is all in all. It's very interesting. This Prabhupada, you know, this is the power of Shastra. Is it, you know, it changes our vision. So here's Maharaj Chitraketu lamenting that his son is dead. But Prabhupada saying he could have considered the situation otherwise. He could have thought this living entity was my enemy in my past life. Now, having appeared as my son, he is permanently leaving just to give me pain and agony. He should actually be happy that his enemy is dead. That's not a mindset that we come to on our own conclusion, because it's a much it's like an eagle's eye view. Like currently in material life, we look at everything very small. We just see this one, but we don't even see this whole lifetime. We just see this, sometimes even just one day. We can't see bigger than that. But Shastra gives us this greater understanding of the entirety of the situation. Because Prakriti Kriyamanani Gunai Karmani Sarvashaha Ahankara Vimudatma Ahankara Vimudatma Tat Katham Iti Manyate, that the spirit soul, bewildered by the false ego, thinks himself the doer of activities which are in actuality carried out by the modes of material nature. And this is one of the most deep-rooted tendencies and faults of the conditioned living beings, to think that we are the doer. And somehow these situations are a result of us, but everything's working under the modes of material nature. Now, when we understand these situations and we understand the temporary nature of all these material relationships and the temporary nature of this entire situation, it can sometimes feel a little bit overwhelming or a little bit helpless by what to do, In one sense, philosophically, I understand. I'm reading the Shastra and I understand, but how am I supposed to actually come to this realization? Because I'm completely bound up by the false ego. I'm constantly thinking of these people as my father, my friend, etc. I'm constantly thinking that I am the doer. And that's why we turn to Lord Nityananda. It's very nice. The first, tomorrow's the appearance day of Srinatham Das Thakur, so I guess we get in the mood. The first prayer of Srinatham Das Thakur and Partana, collection of prayers. Goranga Bolite Habe Pulak Ashakira. Prabhupada writes a very, very nice purport to this prayer. And because it's describing, first, Narottam Das Thakur is begging, like, when will my tears be flowing from my eyes, my body be trembling in ecstasy when I chant the name Gauranga. And then later, he says, when will I get the shelter of Lord Nityananda and become free from all material desires? And then, by the mercy of Lord Nityananda, then I will get entrance into Vrindavan. And then finally says, when will I come under the shelter of the lotus feet of the 6 Goswamis of Vrindavan? Sri Rupa Goswami, Sri Sanatana Goswami, Sri Raghunath Bhatta Goswami, Sri Raghunath Das Goswami. It says, when will I get their shelter? Because when I get their mercy, then I can understand the intimate loving affairs of Lord Krishna. And so Prabhupada describes, he mentions it twice. He mentions it in this purport, and also in the 7th chapter of the Adi Lila, that first of all, it's very interesting. I often don't hear it in this order, but first of all, you get the mercy of Lord Gauranga, and you come to the ecstatic position. Shishi Kudnatai Mai Prasasiki. And we often see that, you just look at the deities, the mercy of Lord Chaitanya takes you to the ecstatic position. But that's not enough. Then you need the mercy of Lord Nityananda to get you free from all material desires. Because although we can be experiencing great emotional ecstasy or etc., we can still have material desires within the heart. Therefore, that's not a sustainable position to have. So therefore, we pray to Lord Nityananda to get free from all material desires. And then when we're free from all material desires, then it's described, this is a position where we can actually enter into Vrindavan, which is the goal, we see Krishna Das Kaviraj Goswami. He describes how he's so humble. He's such an exalted personality. But he describes the mercy of Lord Nityananda. He's describing how he has a dream, and there's Lord Balaram, who's huge, and his bees are buzzing around him, and he's saying, Krishna, Krishna, in a deep voice. It's described like that. Now who knows what it's like to hear Lord Balaram saying Krishna, Krishna, in a deep voice. And there's loads and loads of devotees, I think cowherd boys, running around his feet, and they're also shouting Krishna, Krishna. And so Krishna Das Kaviraj Goswami, he has this dream, and Lord Nityananda, he says to him, yes, now you go to Vrindavan and you will have all success. So he says, so Krishna Das Kaviraj, he's offered his obeisances in the dream, and he's just ecstatic. And he wakes up and he thinks, okay, now I go to Vrindavan. Now this is it's a great lesson to learn in spiritual life, is that when we receive an instruction, there's nothing actually holding us back. When it's directly the desire of Krishna, our spiritual master, which is none different, and the only thing that's holding us back is ourselves. We can make so many external excuses like, oh, my dear Lord Nityananda, I know you've invited me to Vrindavan, but I've got this nice house, and I've already bought off, I've paid off the mortgage, and surely it makes sense I just stay here for some time, I could sell it, etc. What will my family do? Will my family take care of themselves? Or I have this job. And therefore we can create excuses, and we can fully convince ourselves externally. But that's why being around devotees is very important, because sometimes devotees they'll tell you as it is. No, you're a Maya. There's one, I think it was Sridhar Swami, one of the great commentators on the Srimad Bhagavatam. He was thinking, why? He's very, very renounced, but he was a grihasta, had family life, but wanted to sort of take sannyas and leave everything behind. I was thinking, what to do? Should I leave? And I think he sees, it's a scorpion. So there's if anyone can remember, I think it was a scorpion he sees. The mother scorpion has a baby scorpion there as well. And then somehow the mother scorpion dies. I don't know much about how scorpions give birth. Maybe it's in rice, actually, I think. But anyway, there's a mother and a baby scorpion, and then suddenly the mother scorpion is taken away, and so there's this baby scorpion on its own. It's not a scorpion; it's another animal. It's a lizard, I think. Yeah, it's a lizard. So there's a little baby lizard on its own, and so he's watching it, and he's got all these things in his mind about, I need to leave. I need to go to. I think going to Vrindavan, take the renounced order of life. But I have family who depend on me. What to do? He's thinking like this. And then she's looking at the lizard, and the lizard's a tiny little baby, just freshly born into the world. And catches a fly. And then says the realization, well, the lizard can take care of itself, that nature is actually providing. Now he's at very, very high state of realization. We're not supposed to imitate that sort of mindset, but to realize that if we're being called to Vrindavan by Lord Nityananda, then anything external, such as plain affairs, they will be taken care of by Krishna. One of the definitions of faith is to fully know that simply by serving Lord Krishna, that everything will be taken care of. This is one of the hallmarks of people who worship demigods, and we see it. We can say, these, all these Hindus, they worship demigods. We're Vaishnavas, we do not. But still, the mindset is there that, okay, I worship Krishna, I'll chant my rounds, that's good, but still, I need to take care of the other things on the side. I still need to work this job. But I'm just going to work. It's a meat factory. It doesn't matter. I'm just getting some money because Krishna's not going to provide all that. I'll just work here for a little bit. He's somehow holding back because we don't fully believe that Krishna will take care of everything. But this is, It's because we're not studying Srila Prabhupada's books enough. We study Srila Prabhupada's books, we can see that Krishna is completely in control of everything, and he's blissful, and he's not worried about anything. We're the ones who are stressed out trying to think that somehow or other I have to be in control of the situation. It's very, very, very stressful, you know. That peace formula is given in the Bhagavad Gita that we can only achieve peace, Jatvaman Shantanuchiti, when know that Krishna is the supreme enjoyer, Bhoktaram Yagitapasam Sarva Loka Maheshwaram Suritam Sarvabhutanam. That not only is he the supreme enjoyer, but he's also the supreme controller. You know, everything's under his control. Because you see, it's funny, like when you look at people who are in charge of a very superficial situation, sometimes you can see perhaps someone like children who are playing in like some nursery, and there's someone who's in charge of that situation. Well, it's a little child, children are playing, and they're very stressed out trying to organize everything. And like as a grown up, you can think, oh, that's quite pitiful. You know, they're all getting all stressed over a situation which just means nothing. They're playing with maybe sandcastles, and this child's getting very stressed. But literally, what we're doing is the same. You know, everything is under the direct control of the Supreme Lord. You know, and especially as devotees, if we're chanting Krishna's holy names, if we're sincerely trying to make advancement in devotional service, we're trying to serve Srila Prabhupada's mission, then Krishna will go out his way to actually make the material situations. I won't use the word favourable because it won't be always favourable in a material sense, but what we get is the best thing possible for us to make advancement in spiritual life if we're sincere in our desires. We want nothing more than to just spread Srila Prabhupada's mission, then Krishna will take care of everything if we just allow him to. But if we're so busy trying to look after the material situation, we're not giving him any space to actually work his magic. You know, this is the thing. Is when we get put into somewhat difficult situations, when we get stretched slightly, that the real magic happens. You know, if you're just having, I've been on Sankirtan a lot, like having a nice day, people are stopping, you're very funny, people are giving donations. Magic doesn't often happen on these days. Magic happens when you're really, really praying, you're really struggling, you're really thinking, Krishna, I'm just out here, I'm completely hopeless. You know, simply if you desire, then you can send some people who will take some books, but I can do nothing. Then in this mood, then we really see that everything becomes alive. And as you see with advanced devotees, they have this mood constantly thinking. And we see actually with Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami, right before he receives a dream from Lord Nityananda, he's describing that he is lower than a worm in stool. He says this. You know, he says, anyone who chants my name, they lose all the results of their pious activities. That's his mind. That's his mindset. And this is not some sort of superficial, like, oh, look at me, I'm very humble. Now, this is someone who completely just thinks that they are worthless. But because they have that mindset, they can become fully empowered. You know, they can get the mercy of Lord Nityananda, they can get entrance into Vrindavan. Because they have that mindset. You know, as Dr. Prabhu was mentioning yesterday, that we have to feel that we're worthy, that we need the mercy. We have to beg for the mercy, you know, because I mean, if we're stuck in the material world, then we're in dire need of mercy, and humility is not some advanced quality. Humility is, in one sense, it is advanced, but in actuality, is just to see reality as it is. To see reality as it is humility. Because then you begin to realize how helpless this situation is. You know, it's full of these material desires, full of this propensity to become the enjoyer, full of so, yeah. And in that mindset, then we can really pray. You know, then we can really pray. And so, So it goes like this. First the mercy of Lord Chaitanya comes. Of course, mercy is it cannot be categorized. Everything's transcendental. So in some sense, first comes the mercy of the Vaishnavas. Brahmanda Brahmate Gono Bhagyavan Jiva Guru Krishna Prasadi Bhai Bhakti Rata Bija. We're just wandering around this material world. By the mercy of the spiritual master, then we get the Bhakti Lata Bij. It's also described by the mercy of Krishna, we get a spiritual master. And it's also by the mercy of the Vaishnavas that we can get in touch with his movement. So, in one sense, mercy is absolute, is infinite. We cannot actually perceive where it starts. But at least one understanding is given by Srila Prabhupada is that, first we get the mercy of Lord Chaitanya, we come to the ecstatic platform. Then we get the mercy of Lord Nityananda, we become free from material desires, and when we become free from material desires, we're ready to enter into Vrindavan. Lord Chaitanya prays like this. He says, my mind has nothing other than the desire to serve Krishna. And this mindset, nothing other than the desire to serve Krishna. This is Vrindavan. Because Vrindavan is a state of consciousness. So Lord Chaitanya says when he's praying, in the mood of Srimati Radharani, that my mind is Vrindavan. My mind is nothing other than desire to serve Krishna. Therefore, my dear Lord, please place your lotus feet in my mind. Very nice prayer. Yeah. So first Lord Chaitanya, then Nityananda, and then the mercy of the 6 Goswamis. And because it's by their mercy, then we can understand such deep and intimate pastimes. Yeah, we don't have to think that we have to start researching all sorts of advanced scriptures, etc. No, everything's in Prabhupada's books. Prabhupada's books are the the ripened fruit. So we can humbly, today, Lord Nityananda's mercy is still flowing. His appearance day might have been yesterday, but the celebration in Karuna Bhavan is also tomorrow. So he extends his birthday. We can still pray to him for his mercy that we may be able to also become free from material desires. Well, first we can pray to Lord Chaitanya. May I please come to the ecstatic platform. Then to Lord Nityananda. May I please become free from all material desires. And may I one day be granted residence in Vrindavan. And then we can try to take shelter at the lotus feet of the 6 Goswamis. So maybe I will stop here if there's any comments or questions or corrections. And I appreciate that I'm not particular.
Hare Krishna, thank you for very nice class, Prabhu. So I wanted to ask, regarding the faith and regarding the endeavor. On one hand, if we study and have a good sadhana and good association, then things happen in our life. We will see the hand of Krishna in whatever is happening. On other hand, when we go on Sankirtan, we are not just kind of standing there and having faith that this Krishna will take care of everything. You actually have to get really involved. And on one hand, devotee doesn't have an anxiety, but on the other hand, the things really happen when you are entering that space of anxiety. So it is a bit of a paradox, but it is true. Both things that you're saying is true, but it's kind of paradox and it requires a bit of clarification if you'd like to expand on that.
We can't just go out in the street and just go, Krishna, I just really want to distribute these books, I really want it, and then not make it actually, not have any books with us. We see the spiritual world is full of activity as well. Devotees are in anxiety on how to serve Krishna. And so we offer what we can to Krishna, Sankirtan is a yagya, and so in some sense you do a yagya, you get very nice paraphernalia, you build up the the sacred altar, etc., and you get ghee. Ghee is like it's one of the most purest substances. From a cow produces so much milk, and then from the milk you get the cream, and from the cream you get the butter, and then from the butter you get the ghee. It's the essence, and then you pour that into the fire. It's not that you just make the fire and then leave it. So similarly, we very much have to make the endeavor. This is one of the we've been given this material body, etc., and it's we can purify it by engaging it in the sacrifice of Sankirtan. And so very much by making this endeavor is demonstrating that we want to serve. We're not going to be given the opportunity to serve unless we can actually demonstrate that I want to serve. And then when Krishna sees that someone is willing and ready to be of service, then in some sense he will send people who will reciprocate. But maybe if you have any clarifications of other things, I would appreciate if you could say.
Just a quick comment on this. When you worry, then you don't have to worry. But then if you don't worry, then you have to worry. That makes sense.
There's a conversation with Bhishma Dev and Yudhisthira, and Yudhisthira is asking, how does destiny take place? And Bhishma Dev says there's two things actually. There's destiny and there's exertion. But then he says, but the original destiny has been created by the initial exertion. So everything is really based upon exertion.
Exertion of the individual jiva.
Yeah. So your exertion. So you may have some karma from previous exertion, but depending on the intensity of your exertion. Like with Dhruv Maharaj, he wasn't performing pure devotional service, but he got the darshan of the Lord because of his exertion. It was so intense. Tivrena, it's Sanskrit. And then, of course, when the Lord appeared, then the purification took place. So initially, their intensity has to be established.
I guess also there's it's more a question like something perhaps is like book distribution. We can see it as like a means. We engage in all this sort of physical activity in order to then come to the platform where we can see it as like I do all this Sankirtan for some time and then I'll be able to chant Hare Krishna. In one sense, it's like a cause and effect, whereas I'm not so sure, but maybe perhaps this is not the ultimate goal. The ultimate goal is to continue to be able to exert ourselves for Krishna service. We should never do any service with the desire to finish or desire to get it over with. But, I'm not so sure. Sankirtan doesn't take place so much in the spiritual world. Yeah, is there any other comments or questions? Okay. Jai. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki. Srila Prabhupada ki. Nitai Gaur Brahmanandi.
Jai!
Jai! All of you ki. Jai.